Hello, my name is Carrie Wrigley, and this is my video midterm for Education and History 3521, Spring 2018. Mintz wrote, idyllic images of childhood past in which young people move seamlessly toward adulthood are invariably misleading, but for no time period is this more mistaken than the early 19th century, when pathways to adulthood were exceedingly uncertain. I think he meant that there was never a golden age of childhood or a smooth, distinct transition into adulthood at any point in American history. The demarcation to adulthood has changed from different ages at different times in our country's history. The definition of childhood is a dynamic process. It changes as the social and economic conditions change. A family's socioeconomic status led to different views of a child's place in the family and the nature of their childhood. That socioeconomic status also determined a child's educational opportunities. The 19th century was changing rapidly. Mintz also talks about all the new opportunities for employment and schooling. He also talks about how people were moving from rural farms and villages to the larger towns and the growing cities. The 19th century brought about a big change in education and what childhood meant. The Industrial Revolution brought all of these changes, which impacted every part of a family's life. I had discovered that society and schools' education are as intertwined as perception and action are. They are also a reflection of each other. Education is a subsystem and performs a function for society. Society also performs a function for education. Schools help to teach the children the basic information needed in society. School and education has been considered the great equalizer. Schools act as a bridge between families and the general society. It's a training ground for our children. Schools and education perform a role in society. At the same time, education is also conditioned by our social structure. Heather, is it still recording? The question of whether school influences society and vice versa has a similar ring to me as the nature or nurture question. Nurture affects our nature, and nature affects our nurture. Education is a social issue. Schools evolve with societal changes, and societal changes evolve from schooling. Schooling is a means of socialization. Qualities that are present today that weren't present in the past are: schools today use age separation, grades, and have common core curriculum. They also utilize standard methods of assessments. Teachers today are formally trained and educated. They are also required to be certified by the state they work in. They now have year-round employment. Schools now have federal funding, and as a result of that, the federal government is a watchdog to ensure no child is left behind. A relatively decent education is widely available to everyone. Schools now try to create an environment of cultural diversity. At the turn of the century, with the great influx of immigrants, schools were a place where children were indoctrinated as new Americans with democratic values. Education of women and minorities was not present in the far past. School design and environmental standards were not present. There were no libraries and few textbooks. There was no transportation and no lunch provided. Some of the qualities that still exist today are inequality. There is still an argument that lower-income populations get a substandard level of resources for their schools. Politics still play a large role in schooling. New knowledge that has come to me in this course in particular has been the podcast, Mrs. Buchanan's Period of Adjustment. I never thought when segregation supposedly ended that the teacher at the Negro schools would be out of jobs. It also never occurred to me that the NAACP were the ones who guided Mr. Brown in his attempt to enroll his daughter in an all-white school. Until listening to this podcast, it never occurred to me that Negro children may have been receiving as good or maybe even a better education than their white counterparts. Most importantly for me was the language used in the Supreme Court's ruling. To hear the exact language used was offensive. The language reinforced the thinking of the past and at that present time that the intelligence of black people were less than that of their white counterparts. I have also enjoyed the other TED Talks. They've exposed me to the different ways of thinking how education can be presented. Thank you for your patience.